Hey everyone, good to see you again. Last time, we dug into major scales and found out that each one follows a pattern of WWHWWWH, where H is a half step and W is a whole step. By the way, I made a mistake in our last tutorial. I mentioned earlier that black keys represent sharps in major and flats in the minor key, but that was incorrect information. After looking into it more, I discovered there are keys like E flat major and A flat major. So let me correct myself. Major scales are characterized by the WWWHWWWH pattern. Minor scales follow the WHWWHWWW pattern. Sharp and flat on the black keys are used depending on the situation. In music notation, sharps are often used when ascending, and flats are used when descending. This convention helps maintain clarity and readability in written music. But then again, it depends on the situation. For example, in the case of F major, we use flats instead of sharps. In the last session, I added sharps to the notes on the sheet music for better understanding. But realistically, continuously adding sharps could seem quite redundant. If we had to draw a sharp every time we wrote sheet music, it would be very challenging. So, to avoid this redundancy, we have what's called a key signature. When you place a sharp in the key signature, it automatically instructs you to play the next notes with sharps. For instance, if you put a sharp on F note in the key signature, it means you play F3, F4, F5, F6, and so on with sharps. This makes things much more concise. Imagine having to draw a sharp next to each F note every time. It would be quite cumbersome. In the case of D major, there are 5 sharps. Drawing a sharp next to each note every time would be quite unpleasant. Thankfully, with key signatures, sheet music organization becomes much more manageable. Key signatures typically place sharps or flats according to the major scale in the first part of the first measure. In a nutshell, the goal of today's lesson is to organize major scales more efficiently. Key signatures follow a rule. When adding sharps to a major scale, always add them in the order of F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Conversely, when adding flats to a major scale, follow the order B, E, A, D, G, C, F. As you can see, the order of sharps and flats is entirely reversed. We call this rule the circle of fifths. In fact, you can think of all the rules for key signatures as originating from here. Looking at the circle, the outer part represents major scales, and the inner part represents minor scales. Since we're only focusing on major scales, we can ignore the minor scales inside. Now let's dive into the circle of fifths. As mentioned earlier, when adding sharps, we use the order F, C, G, D, A, E, B. The interesting part is that the pitch of each note is exactly fifth apart. Let's see. Starting from F, after 5 notes, we reach C. Then, after another 5, we get G, and so on. D, A, E, and the last one, B. They are precisely fifth pitches apart. That's why it seems like we're drawing a circle, and we call it the circle of fifths. When adding flats, it's the opposite. So we use the order B, E, E, A, D, G, C, F. And again, there's a fifth pitch difference between each note. It's easier to memorize cases such as F, C, G, D, A, E, and B, along with their corresponding reversals like B, E, A, D, G, C, and F. Or if you don't want to memorize, you just have to remember F and start counting fifth. That would also work as well. If you're wondering why we start with the F note for naming sharps, I have no clue. But if I make up a story, the F major scale is a weird one. If we look at the circle of fifths, the F major scale is located right here, and let me color it for you. As you can see, F major is the only one that doesn't have a flat in the name. So this guy looks more like it belongs to the sharp group. But then F major doesn't have a sharp. Maybe this is why for naming sharp, we start with the note F. Sorry, I tried to be silly, but if it helps you memorize, you are welcome. Anyway, one of the additional advantages of the circle of fifths is that you can quickly see how many sharps or flats each major scale has. Now, let me give you a problem. Which major scale has 3 sharps? The answer is a major scale. And which major scale has 4 flats? The answer is a flat major scale. Now, what scale has neither flats nor sharps? You got it right. It's the C major scale. That's why some call it the natural C major scale. If you understand that all the rules we learned today about key signatures in sheet music come from the circle of fifths, then today's lesson is done. Honestly, I'd be very satisfied if you've grasped it up to this point. We've been able to figure out how many flats and sharps are in each major scale by looking at the circle of fifths. But now, let's try something a bit more challenging. This time, we'll play a game where you have to identify the major scale just by looking at the key signature. Try to solve the problem here. Don't look at the circle of fifths for reference. How is it? Difficult, right? In fact, this problem was intentionally given to be challenging. It's because we tend to think we've learned everything subconsciously. Of course, if you glance at the circle of fifths, you'll quickly figure it out. However, imagine if this diagram wasn't available. How would you determine the answer? But don't worry, I have a trick up my sleeve. I'll teach you those rules systematically. There are tricks to determine the major scale by looking at the key signature. We have a general guide for both sharp and flat key signatures. Let's start with the sharp key signatures. First, count how many sharps are hanging out in the key signature. Now, find the note of the last sharp in the group. 3. Move up a half step, basically 1 key on the piano. From that last sharp note, boom, the note you land on is the starting point, the main guy of the major key. Let's put this logic into practice by solving some problems. When you look at the key signature, there are 2 sharps, and the last sharp is C sharp. If you go up a half tone from C sharp, it becomes D. So this is the D major scale. Let's confirm if the answer is correct by checking the circle of fifths. D major scale. Now, do you get how it works? This time I won't help you, but I believe you can do it. Try solving it yourself and feel free to pause the video. A major scale. E major scale. B major scale. If you say F major, you fall into my trap card. Remember, F major is special one. This is one that use flat, not sharp. If you say C major, you know that C major is natural major scale, which means there shouldn't be any sharp or flat. C hash major scale. Now let's tackle flats. Flats are a bit easier to handle. For flat key signatures, first, start by counting how many flats are in the key signature. Next, look at the second to last flat in the sequence. This note represents the 4th degree of the major key. Then, congratulations, the key you found is the major key. An exception is F major scale, which has 1 flat B flat. Let's apply the rules starting from 2 flats. Firstly, we have 2 flats. The pattern for writing flats in the key signature is B, E, A, D, G, C, F. The second to last flat gives us the major scale, so the answer is B flat. Next, what if we have 3 flats? B, E, A, the second to last one. E, E flat is the major scale in this case. Now it's your turn. A flat major scale. D flat major scale. G flat major scale. C flat major scale. With this, I think you've got a solid grasp of what key signatures are and how the circle of fifths operates. However, if there's one thing I feel a bit bummed about personally, it's that we probably should have kicked things off by delving into the basics of pitch notes. But hey, we ended up tying up this section first. Next up, we'll dive into musical notation and explore the various types of notes. Until then, catch you in the next session.